Hello, everybody. So, a friend of mine had recently sent me this video because it's something that I am passionately like to talk about, and essentially it revolves around a guy who's basically delving into the anti-power scaling mindset, something that I honestly thought was long gone at this point. I thought many of those people kind of died in the 2010s. But apparently, we got a guy here who's basically had that seeped into his brain like a little parasite, and now he's made this video trying to invoke that same frustration that he has in himself, that he can't understand power scaling, that he had to make this video. So let's see it. Let's see what Mr. Eris has to say and why, like, power scaling has gotten him so upset.
Oh, I'm going to piss a lot of people off. Oh boy, am I going to piss a lot of people off, but here we go.
I wonder why you think that. Why do you think this is going to piss a lot of people off, Eris? Why don't you tell me why? Why is it going to piss a lot of people off? We'll see. We'll see what happens. Oh, I wonder why. We'll definitely have to see the further into this video.
Power scaling is the dumbest and worst thing to ever happen to fiction, and here's why.
Oh boy.
Here's a perfect example of why power scaling is just stupid, because this is exactly what power scalers be like.
Okay, so we start off the video right after the initial claim that you say that power scaling is one of the dumbest things that ever happened in fiction, and your big magnum opus for why power scaling is the dumbest thing to ever happen to fiction is a meme somebody created in which they noticed something within the plot of the story of Star Wars, that Lando Calrissian was able to resist the pull of the Sarlacc, and the Sarlacc also happened to pull down the Slave One, and it was not able to do that. Seriously? This is what you got mad about? Well, let's see. Does he provide any more points of why this pisses him off? We'll see.
They're all like, the Sarlacc pit was able to pull down a spaceship, aka...
So, here's the other thing of why I think you know why this is going to piss a lot of people off. It's because you're making a broad generalization of a group of people that like to do a certain thing. Right? And that certain thing, by the way, dude, is completely harmless and doesn't harm anybody. Right? A lot of those people like to do this for fun. And I can imagine the real Jar Jar Binks guy that made this meme and had his watermark on it probably was doing the exact same thing as most of anybody else who likes to make memes and who likes to talk about power scaling, is that they were having fun. But apparently, you like to either shit on that fun because you take this stuff way too seriously as opposed to most people who like to power scale, but now you're just shitting on it because some part of it just really irks you. But let's continue.
A Boba Slave One, but not Lando Calrissian, making Lando by far the strongest living being in Star Wars canon.
Now, I could probably get what made you really upset about this post, which is probably this last sentence here, which I get. It more than likely is wrong. And from what I know, so here's the thing. If I were to teach this guy how to power scale, or if I were to teach this guy how to address this post if he doesn't like it, or whatever, because he may think it be inconsistent with the actual story. So what I would ask the person that actually makes this argument is, what does he mean by the strongest living being? Is he referring to physically strong? Overall strong? Because you need to ask these people questions, and when it comes to broad statements like this, especially when it affects the entire, like as he said, the entire Star Wars canon. So he's now saying that this feat trumps anything else in Star Wars, right? That's what I would ask the dude, is, do you think that this feat over trumps all these other feats? And then ask them why. All right? And then guess what? You get into a conversation with the guy, you get to better understand each other, and maybe wondering why his interpretation of these feats and him coming to this certain conclusion is wrong, right? Because necessarily these feats correlating to each other like, is still valid. Like, you can still make the valid argument for this. The problem that I'm seeing that the guy's probably going to come to is that he has a problem with this conclusion. And the problem is that what I expect he's going to start saying is that the whole, like, this conclusion here is the problem with power scaling, is that people can come to these conclusions. But enough of me trying to guess. Let's see what he has to say.
This is literally their logic. If it could do this to a spaceship but not this to a human, then that human is stronger than the spaceship. It's like, what? Really?
Just stop generalizing, bro. Like, just please stop generalizing as like, this is what power scalers do.
A human is stronger than the spaceship. It's like, what? Really? So you're telling me Lando over here, Lando Calrissian, is more powerful than a damn spaceship, than the Slave One? He's
just another teaching lesson, my guy. But if you really wanted to attack this argument, do you really think that is probably not the best, like, argument you could be using here. Especially if you did not want to make yourself look like an enraged baby.
He's more powerful than Vader, than like Palpatine, Luke, like everyone. Like, that's the logic here. This is why it's so dumb.
Why don't you just say that the post is dumb, bro? Like, again, you were on the right track, right? You were then starting to compare this statement and compare what Lando is doing in this feat by this guy's estimation to Vader, to Luke, to Palpatine, right? You're now comparing, like, because of this, like premise to the conversation, you are now bringing up other characters to then compare Lando to be like, okay, so based off of this feat, are you now claiming that he now compares to Vader, Luke, and Palpatine, all that stuff? You're heading on the right track. And you're right, the logic behind this is really dumb. I agree with you.
It is so dumb, because this breaks down power scaling. It's exactly what it is, because
it breaks down power scaling? What do you mean it breaks down power scaling? How does this meme or this person's interpretation in which he comes to this conclusion, how does that break down power scaling as a whole? Please tell me that, because I really do not understand that.
The Sarlacc pit was able to pull down the Slave One, but not Lando. Power scalers would be like, that means Lando is like the strongest being in Star Wars canon. And
now, I'm all for shitting on people's like really bad interpretations in which they come to really bad conclusions that don't take a lot of the like consistency of the story into account. Like, I'm all for that, right? And because I'm all open for open criticism when it comes to arguments that people make. And I feel like people are free to think what they want in terms of that, because this is fiction. This is fiction. I want to reiterate that. This is fiction. People are allowed to come to these conclusions because it doesn't harm anybody by doing that. And because we're allowing other people to come to these conclusions, we are now opening ourselves up to criticism. And I think that is a healthy thing to do because it sparks conversation. It leads to us talking to each other and trying to come to a better understanding on whether or not this conclusion is true based off of these two feats. All right? Because that's what power scaling does. That's what power scaling promotes, right?
Definitely, he's got more torque and strength than a damn starship. I am not a fan of power scaling. I feel like the logic...
Why are you, like, letting this meme just represent all of power scaling? Like, this is another generalization, and you, like, getting so upset over this one meme this guy made, and now, from what I understand, because you didn't elaborate more on your position, is that this has now affected your whole view of power scaling as a whole. And now, because this meme has made you so upset because of the logic and that has come to the conclusion was so dumb, you now just think power scaling as a whole sucks, which is the equivalent of you coming across a really, really bad painting of something, and because you were just so baffled that someone could draw something so horrendously bad, even though it just came from like a guy trying his best, trying to paint something that he thought was cool or whatever, but because you let that affect you so much that now you just hate art, That's the equivalence of what you're trying to do here. Because power scaling is a tool that you use in which you are looking at something, you are interpreting it, and then taking what was provided from that thing, and then saying, look at these things that I have in my hand. Like, this is a feat, this is a statement, here's another feat. Oh, there's 2 feats. They seem correlated with each other. Maybe I can draw a conclusion based off of these 2 feats here. All right, that's what you're doing. Like, in baby terms, what power scaling is. You're taking what happens in the story, and then you're interpreting that in the ways where we're now trying to scale the power of characters. That's what we're doing.
Because dumb, it's often inconsistent, and it doesn't take into consideration plot.
Okay, so 2 things there. 1, if you think that power scaling is inconsistent, that's a skill issue unironically. Like, that's you having a skill issue. If you yourself are coming to inconsistent conclusions, or conclusions that where essentially you're realizing, oh, a bunch of these things are inconsistent with each other. Maybe the reason you're coming to these conclusions and realizing, oh, a bunch of this stuff is inconsistent, maybe because you're not interpreting them in a way in which they can become consistent, right? Not everything is just, like, especially, like, this is what people were having the problem with comics, right? People who don't read comics often see all these feats occur, and because some of them just happen, or some of them don't exactly, because they don't understand power scaling in yourself and how to interpret things, try to look at things holistically, and then basically try to jumble them together and be like, does this exactly make something inconsistent if this were to be true? Like, you can have these conversations with people. Sometimes you're like, hey, do you think this may be inconsistent? Right? Because again, power scaling is not at fault here. Again, power scaling is a concept in which you use, right? It's not this external thing that someone created, right?
The main thing that drives any character.
Also, I just remembered the plot thing. So I completely understand. Like, I have to deal with Dragon Ball fans all the time, where they like to basically take things out of context, meaning they don't consider the plot of the story most of the time whenever they're trying to interpret feats, because they're not looking things holistically. In other words, they're looking at the entire plot of the story and be like, does this make things more consistent if it were to be true? And does it correlate along with the story that it's being told? Right? Because that's what we're doing. We're reading a story, we're interpreting it, and trying to come to a conclusion based off of what is told to us in the story. All right? And sometimes people don't often do that because some people have biases. Some people have agendas. In these cases, sometimes with people like Goku, some people who like Saitama, or even people who like Superman have certain agendas because they like those characters more. So what ends up happening is they go on either confirmation biases, which then leads them, because they want to come to a certain conclusion, they end up seeing things differently on purpose because they want to come to a certain conclusion. And because they're looking for a certain conclusion to draw to, they are now interpreting these statements and feats differently, as opposed to someone who's just curious about how powerful, say, Goku is, or Saitama, or Superman, right? Or people who just have agendas, who are just saying, I want Goku to be the strongest character in fiction. All right, how do I do that? Okay, so I'm going to take all these statements. How do I best do that? All right, maybe I'll take these out of context. Okay, so it makes it a bit more ambiguous. All right, and I'm going to interpret these at the highest interpretation level possible. So then, and then put these alongside each other, and then tell people, because of the numerical consistency, and that you can basically do that with a bunch of other things, that it's consistent. And now Goku is the strongest character in fiction because of what that guy did. All right? The logic and or arguments you make may be really, really bad, and it's now our job and everybody else's job to tell the guy that he's an idiot. and explain to him why those arguments aren't good. All right? That's what we do. This is why we talk to people, and this is how we often communicate with each other in real life. When they come to these certain conclusions that have faulty reasoning within them, it's often our job. Sometimes we want to help them or correct them so they don't make that same mistake again, is to talk to them about it. All right? That's how human beings work. But you're trying to act like this is something that people only do in fiction. I'm sorry, buddy. People do this with everything that doesn't involve fiction as well. Power scaling didn't exist when fiction became a thing, right? Like, human beings often compare each other compare themselves to one another, often thinking probably, maybe can I beat that guy in a fight? Well, what has he done? And you often come to these conclusions based off of what you've seen and how you interpret yourself and your actions and what you're capable of. Be like, maybe I can beat that guy in the fight. Or, maybe I shouldn't approach that guy because he has a Glock in his hand. Because his reaction time might be enough to where I might not be able to get to him before he points it at me and then shoots me, right? We do this all the time, all right? This isn't something exclusive to fictional, talk.
Or story forward. If the writer needs a character to do something, the writer is going to make that character do it because of plot. That is the driving force behind.
How do you think plot is made? Right? Sometimes there could be bad plot, good plot. It all depends on the writer. And truthfully, yes, you're right in a way. Writers do make things happen, but oftentimes writers have to sometimes think of things and look at it and be like, is my own story consistent with itself? It's like, imagine we are, just for the sake of simplicity, we are Akira Toriyama here. And we're like, Goku does this thing near the beginning of the story, but he does this other thing later. And this thing might end up contradicting what he does later on. Or the powers in which, say for instance, because this is something I hear all the time. Goku couldn't breathe underwater, but then all of a sudden you just see him out in space, right? It's only maybe often when they're rereading their own story and looking at it maybe it isn't, I shouldn't do that if I already established that Goku needs oxygen in order to survive. So I probably shouldn't include that in there. So they'll either rewrite the scene in the moment, and then once they publish the story, now the story is its own entity. The writer literally no has control over it anymore because it's now its own published story, and now it's Peter Pan. All right? Peter Pan is now its own entity. The writer can't just go in there, write something on the book, and then put it back. All right? That's not how that works. All right? And what I think he's trying to go on here is he's trying to go with the Stan Lee way, where Stan Lee was fed up with people having to rely upon him all the time to answer questions in regards to characters from his own series. And essentially what he ends up doing is, you want to know who wins between Hulk and Spider-Man, or Hulk and Thor, or between Iron Man and somebody else? Well, here, let me tell you, it's whoever the author wants to win. It's whoever the author thinks would make the most sense and for them to win. All right? Yes, that is true within the moment. All right? But it's such a cop-out, reasoning for actually addressing the actual question. All right? People are coming to you for your opinion, right? And when they come to you for your opinion, they expect to hear what you think, right? But what Stan Lee did there is that he didn't actually answer the question, all right? Because the stories have already been published, but they often want to know, what does he think of his own stories in retrospect, now that all these years of comics have now been made and published? Well, like I said, because he often gets these questions all the time, he gets fed up with it. So then he creates this answer in which now people use it as a coping mechanism whenever they don't know how to answer the question or they don't know how to engage in these conversations, right? That's why I ultimately think this guy has gotten so fed up, and that's why often people become anti-power skillers, is because they don't know themselves how to engage in this topic, and they are afraid of looking dumb. So instead of trying to understand, learn, ask questions, engage in conversations, learn things, make mistakes, and all that stuff that humans often do, he then just goes on the denial train, basically says it's stupid, people coming to this conclusion are stupid, or people who even use it are stupid, right? That's why he's become so much of a denier, a power scaling denier, that that this post right here has basically ruined it for him so much that now he can't look at it the same way, which is honestly the saddest thing to me. Like I said, that you would let something like this get to you so much to the point where it's ruined your entire view of power scaling as a whole, as opposed to you just not liking the guy that made this post's opinion. All right? Because guess what? People in real life had bad opinions. All right? Sometimes, in order to not hear those bad opinions, you may not want to listen to them anymore, or you might not talk to them anymore, or might not hang around them anymore. Or if you meet that person online, you can easily hit the block button or completely ignore them whenever they try to engage in conversations where even sometimes you're not involved in, which again, you can just hit the block button and not talk to them. Or this is something you can do, and what you're doing right now is that you're using a platform on social media in order to exercise an opinion you have in regards to you criticizing this post, in which this video easily could have been. You could have easily just used this video as a moment to basically crap on this dude's interpretation of these feats and coming to this conclusion. That could have been your video there, and a lot of people could have ended up agreeing with you in the comments, being like, yes, I agree, man. Like this video, like this meme is so dumb. I don't know how he could have just thought that he could have compared to Vader or to Luke or to even Palpatine, bro. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you could have easily done that, but no, you had to basically shit on the idea of power scaling for yourself because, one, you don't understand it, and two, because you don't feel confident in yourself to actually engage in the subject, you feel the need to shit on it. You know what that's called? Whenever people shit on ideas that they don't understand, like for simply no good reason at all, it's called an insecurity, right? That's essentially what anti-power scalers are. They're really insecure people that aren't confident in themselves to engage in these topics, and because they're unwilling to admit faults here, what they want to do is they use this platform to exercise their opinion and then have people reiterate that same opinion back onto them, making them feel all cuddly inside, like, oh man, I know those power skillers really got you, bro, but don't worry, I believe you, I believe the same things, bro, it's okay. It's just like, but no, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not okay, all right? What you're doing here is actually harmful to yourself. I know that sounds corny coming from a power scaler, but I'm basically trying to get to the methodology in which he's coming to these conclusions, right? Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean you should just shit on it because you don't understand it, all right? Maybe you should be asking questions. Maybe you should admit some faults whenever you don't know something, right? You know, we can do that. We're human beings. Like, it's okay to do that. I know that was kind of a rant, but let's see. Does he say anything of importance within these last 7 seconds?
That is the driving force behind everything. But, you know, as I always say, to each your own. As for me, not a fan.
To each your own, not a fan. Yeah, well, at least you're okay. At least you're allowed to give people, like, oh, to each your own. Like, you're allowed to have your own opinions, right? That's what I think, too. And I'm a power scaler. You're allowed to have your own opinions. You're allowed to come to your own conclusions based off of what is presented. But based off of that same thing, I'm allowed to have an opinion about your opinion. And guess what? I think your opinion sucks and you have really terrible reasoning for believing in it. And I ultimately think it's harmful for you to like think of these things, because of that, you then think of faulty reasons for other things as well. And like I said, this same idea in this same mindset ends up harming how you approach other things in real life. All right. So let me reiterate this before I close out this recording. Power scaling is a narrative tool in which you look at the plot of the series that somebody wrote, and you're trying to interpret the series, try to look at feats and statements, and use the plot along with it and be like, let's see, how do these things two go together? Do they correlate? Do they mishmash? It's like, oh, maybe they don't mishmash together. Okay, then what about this other thing? All right, and now the big question is, why do we do that? Well, because humans are curious creatures. They want to figure out the world. And when they're presented a world in fiction, our general thing that we want to do is to figure it out. We want to learn. We want to solve. We like problem solving. That is humans. That's what we do. So when we're given a world, we want to better understand it. When we better understand something, most of the time we enjoy it more. But as you had just experienced, Eris, that some people don't often approach things with curiosity. Sometimes they read through the story first and then be like, I really like this character named Goku. All right. And now notices that other people have the same conversation. They're saying that Goku was really, really weak in comparison to these other characters. And for some reason, you think that's an attack on yourself. That because you identified with Goku, right? Or you identified with Saitama, or you identified with Superman. And because you see that as a personal attack on yourself, you then think, oh, well, Goku's not weak. Let me reread through it again. And you try to find things that specifically make Goku stronger than these other characters, right? And that often, people do that. And you just noticed here that somebody made this type of opinion. Look at these things, they happened within the series. They happened within the plot of the series. It's not like they're filler within the movie. They actually happened. These are feats that occurred within the series. You can't deny that the feats happened, right? Right? You can't just say outlier, and then just expect everybody to believe you, right? That's not how conversations work, and that's not even how outliers work. All right? The problem that you should have pointed out was the guy took these two things and then correlated them to saying, because of these two things, this is what the conclusion is that you should draw to. You should have criticized the conclusion in which he came to when trying to power scale this feat here. All right? That's what you should have done. But instead, you didn't do that. All right? Again, I'll reiterate. Power scaling is a tool. It's not this machine that everyone, it's like some type of iPhone that everybody got. And now that this iPhone is now rotting everybody's brains. All right? That's not what power scaling is. All right? Hopefully everybody has learned from this idiot, will not try to become this idiot, and hopefully whenever you see people who act like this, please tell them for me that they don't understand power scaling and that they're free to talk to me, because I love to talk to people and I like to educate people and I like to learn from people and understand their point of views. Because guess what? Just like this dude in this video, I'm human. All right? I'm a curious creature. I like to learn. I like to truth seek. I like to do all these things. What I don't like to do is to generalize things and generalize a group of people and based off of one instance alone. Thank you all for watching, and class is dismissed.